our efforts in respect of the protection of the rights of our citizens did not end in Trinidad. I recall as well, just last year, our efforts to return 28 fishermen who had fallen into distress and were taken to Colombia. Mr. President, when I recall myself and team members being up at 3:30 in the morning, making sure that the arrangements that were in place for the persons who were making sure that they were in safe, warm, and dry surroundings. Remember, we don't have an embassy where they were found and transported to. Making arrangements to ensure that while we were having difficulties repatriating them because of the number, the cost, and all of the verifications of nationality, that they were kept protected. That's the work of the ministry in protecting our citizens when they are in distress overseas. So where it is, and when they were brought home, everyone celebrated it, including the men. And I just want to say that it, again, typifies the fact that when persons seek to position whether me or the ministry or the administration as not caring about the rights of our citizens overseas, it is way off course. It is just unjustified. Mr. President,
you can't understand if you don't listen.
Mr. President, I think it's also important for me to clarify, and this is specifically in relation to the statement I made in Senate last week. Sorry. So I said that the ministry only became aware of the case in relation to the allegations of abuse. I'm not quoting myself. Settle down, settle down. We have a long day. Settle down. Sorry, Mr. President. Mr. President, what I have said and what I intended to communicate was the fact that the ministry only became aware of the allegations of mistreatment and abuse when the case filed against the U.S. Coast Guard in respect of those matters was brought to public attention. It is clear that persons did not understand me as clearly as I would have wished or I would have hoped. I am heartened to note that even
No. Senator Brown, you're going, it's so nice.
I'm heartened to note, Mr. President, that even the lawyer who represents the gentleman has acknowledged that not only was it possible that the Jamaican government did not know about the allegations until they brought the matter to public light and to the world, but he also acknowledged that this was what I had said. So that gives me some comfort. And also other persons have said they understood. But be that as it may, it's my responsibility to clarify, and that's what I'm doing today. As I intended to communicate then, the ministry became aware of the allegations of abuse and mistreatment for the first time when the matters were made public. Yes. I want to make clear as well, Mr. President, that when my statement set out that we had our records, my further statement indicated that we had no records of any complaints being made by the men or by their families. This was not intended to ascribe blame. And the language is quite clear as set out, that there was no blame described, what I sought to do was to point out the times at which the ministry in its operations would normally become aware of a need for consular assistance, where persons report it, where they seek assistance on a deportation, when they complain to the consular officer that does the interview for the issuance of the emergency travel certificate, which happens when they verify nationality, and on their return. That none of those 3 points, or the families, did the ministry become aware. And it's not unusual for us to come by information in that regard. We have had circumstances where ordinary Jamaicans come into the ministry to make a report, or they call, or if they go to national security, that they send them to foreign affairs, or if they go to the police, they send them to foreign affairs, because they recognize that if the person is missing overseas, we are the place that would help. So again, this is not to ascribe blame, it was simply to note and to underscore that we really did not know. So I want to also make clear that when I say that we did not know, we say we did not know about the allegations of abuse. Now also in the Senate, Senator Knight had asked whether the matter was a shipwrighter matter. And I said that I was making inquiries on the matter. I was able to verify that I could confirm that they were deported to Jamaica in 2018, because that was where I had reached in my inquiries and verification. I couldn't verify anything else. When the men were deported to Jamaica, persons may be interested to know that they were deported on a regular charter flight, regular monthly charter. They did not engage with the consular officer together as a group. It was individually and on different days. They did not come to us at that point as persons who had been detained as a group or in circumstances related to detention on the high seas. None of that information came to the Consulate General. So at that point, when the matter came to public office, the first call was to the Consular Department to say, do you know of this? Has this been reported to us? No. Next point of call was to the Consulate General in Miami. Inquiries reflected that these names were in fact persons who had been deported. We could confirm. Did they report any mistreatment? No. We were able to not only confirm that from a lack of record, but from speaking to the specific person who conducted the interviews. Spoke with him. He said no mistreatment. And I said, and again, this is not with ascribing or making a judgment as to the reason that they would not have. That is not for us to say. But when I have asked him, so have people reported when you are doing these interviews? Have people reported to you the persons who are being returned? Have they complained to you before? And he says all the time. We're Jamaicans, we complain, that's what we do, complain about everything. And they have protocols, they have protocols that follow up where complaints of mistreatment are made. But I'm not making any judgment call on the circumstances which may have driven them, to not complain at that point. And they certainly would not be constrained to only complain at that point. I simply share the facts to ensure that not only the Senate, but the public is aware that when I stated that the ministry was unaware about the allegations, and when I stated that I could not confirm, I was making inquiries as to whether this was a matter related to Shiprider, I was legitimately so doing. You would know that those sensitive matters are not kept in the consular department. Matters related to maritime security, Shiprider. Well, they might not have been in your time, but they certainly are now not. They're treated, nope, no, I'm not appealing to you. You know what? I think you're right. I think I will not look at you. It won't add value to my day. But Mr. President, I make these points simply to clarify the circumstances and to try to make clear so people understand. Because while there may be people who see political value in trying to position this matter in a particular way, it is actually important to the ministry that the facts are placed before the people and are placed on the record of the Senate. I was not able to do so last week, so I seek to clarify now. Mr. President, further to the comments which I've just made, I want to also just sort of broaden the context a little bit. And this is therefore taking the matter beyond.
How are we supposed to function as a Senate when you won't allow the minister to say to leave the comment? How can we function as a Senate in this way?
Can I take a point of order on being accused of lying? Can I, Mr. President, are the privileges accorded to senators being abused when I am to be called a liar while on my feet, Mr. President? Can I bring that point of order?
Senator Brown and Skeffrey, the minister is entitled to be heard. Could I ask you to just contain yourself so that you can give the statement? It is also, hang on a minute, wait a minute. It is also unacceptable for anybody to be shouting across the aisle one way or the other that someone is lying. It is unacceptable. So please allow the minister to continue.
President, you just called me and I want to be clear. I said the minister was nervous because she appeared nervous, and certainly to me, I do not believe what she's saying. So I want to make it clear. That's all I was conveying to her,
Minister,
that she needs to take a break. Because she's nervous, and maybe there's a reason for the nervousness.
No,
they sold out the Jamaican fishermen.
Mr. President, there's a consistency in what Senator Brown does. He rises, and instead of giving a point of order, he uses the opportunity to repeat the nonsensical verbiage. What we're asking, Mr. President, is to at least be able to listen to the minister with respect. And I cannot hear. Nobody can hear.
Thank you, Senator Charles. Minister, would you...
President.
Just listen.
President,
lies, wicked, sellout.
No, but I get, Mr. President, with the greatest of respect, Mr. President, in this honorable Senate, senators are not permitted to impute improper motive, to use offensive language, and to do exactly what Senator Brown and Senator Skeffrey are trying to do. I ask Mr. President, that we afforded an opportunity to listen to the minister without this disrespect. And it is consistent. Time after time after time, once minister rises, there's a direct disrespect from Senator Brown against her. The first time I said
Senator Brown.
I wish that withdraw.
No,
I've
Senator
not been
Brown.
disrespectful
Senator
to them.
Brown. Lies, wicked, and sell out. That's what you just shouted across the floor a while ago.
Those are adjectives being used by the citizens of Jamaica.
Yes, I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned about. I'm not concerned. I'm not. I am not concerned. Look here.
I am repeating what you said.
Let me tell you something. 1 minute.
I'm not ascribing to anything.
No,
And now you're lying on Jamaica.
1 minute. 1 minute.
Now you're lying on Jamaica.
Senator Brown.
Lying on
Senator
Jamaicans.
Brown. Senator Charles. Senator Brown. Senator. A lot of things are said. A lot of things are said in Jamaica. Because they are said in Jamaica does not require or permit you to come here and repeat it. And you sit there and shout across the aisle, lies, wicked, and sell out. And I'm ruling that that is unparliamentary and do not repeat it.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Senator Croft.
With due respect, Mr. President, the same argument was put just a second ago, an accusation of lying by Senator Charles, that Senator Brown was lying. So if there should be any equity in the House, Mr. President, that he must also be.
You will, Senator Crawford, you will recall when I was speaking, I was referring to it going both ways, all right? So I'm going to ask the minister to continue, and in the normal course of things, persons are entitled to ask questions at the end of the presentation, and I will permit it. But I'm not going to permit the hurling of abusive, unparliamentary language across the floor. I heard it already, and if it's done again, I will impose sanction. Senate Minister, continue, please. Don't think so? So if you don't think so, do it again.
Mr.
President, please.
Senator Knight, you're on your feet. Senator Knight is on his feet. He's entitled to be heard.
President, I'm going to appeal as an elder that don't cause the kind of discourse that is coming from one side to draw you into a situation where it appears as if you are giving a threat. That's not how you operate. That is not how you operate. And so I would appeal to those who are really trying to cause you to lose your cool in protection of them, not to draw you into this.
Minister, you're going to continue?
Thank you, Mr. President. As I was indicating, Mr. President, further to the comments which I've just made, in respect to our respect for and promotion and protection of the human rights of our citizens, as well as our knowledge of the circumstances, or rather our knowledge of the case related to allegations of abuse and mistreatment, I want to just speak a little more broadly, having clarified those points. And Mr. President, I feel the need to do so, of course, because of comments that have also arisen in the public domain in relation to this bilateral agreement between Jamaica and the United States, which is commonly known as the Shipwrighter Agreement.
The private member.
Mr. President, Jamaica's maritime space is 100,000 kilometers. That's 25 times the size of our land space. Jamaica does not have the financial nor infrastructural capacity to police these waters, to monitor this maritime space. And accordingly, it has been helpful for us to partner with regional and international partners in order to address our very real issues with maritime security. The challenges in respect of the trafficking of drugs, the trafficking of guns, and the trafficking of guns for drugs are real, and they affect the level of violence and crime which we experience in Jamaica. It's an important issue for us to address. And I have to make the point, especially as the term sellout has been noted or has been used.
Mr. President,
Mr.
President, point of order. On a point, I thought you said the word sellout is unparliamentary. If it's going to be allowed to be used by one side.
I didn't.
If it's going to be allowed, if it's going to be allowed by one side, I hope you're going to allow me also to use it.
I did not. Senator Brown, you are well aware, and I can tell by the smirk on your face, that the word in itself is not offensive. It is the use of the word, use of it. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, indeed, it is important for me to clarify that the circumstances that I've just laid out, that it is important for us to partner in order to address our maritime security issues, was in fact noted by both Peter Bunting in the House of Representatives when he was Minister of National Security, when he piloted the amendment to the Maritime Drug Trafficking Suppression Act in 2015. And that is the amendment, Mr. President, that actually gives the Minister of National Security the express right to waive jurisdiction to prosecute its citizens, subject to the advice of the Attorney General. That is the amendment, Mr. President. It was brought to this Parliament by then Minister of National Security, Peter Bunting, and was then piloted in this Senate by then Senator Mark Golding as Minister of Justice. Mr. President, I just wanted to remind us of the circumstances under which these points have been recognized. And I want to also remind, as you yourself might recall, Mr. President, that when the issue of the amendment to grant the right to waive jurisdiction for prosecution was brought to this Senate, the Jamaica Labour Party senators who were then in opposition all voted against, Mr. President, called for a divide and voted against because of concerns that were held. But that being said, Mr. President, what falls to us now, and certainly as has been brought into focus by the case that has come forward, is what can we do to strengthen the protocols for implementation of the Shipwrighter Agreement. Mr. President, in these circumstances, I can advise that we have and I've indicated that we have started discussions with the United States authorities. And they have committed to send a delegation to travel to Jamaica to sit, to work through what we can do better to protect the rights of our citizens and ensure that the concerns which have been raised, and I make the point, again, not ascribing judgment, but simply stating the facts, that at this point there are allegations which remain to be proved, and that we therefore have to speak about them responsibly. It's fine for persons to discuss them in a relaxed manner in the public domain, but as minister and as a representative of the government, it's important that I respect that process, and I treat it sensitively. I treat it with the importance that it requires, and where it is that persons seek to position this in a negative light for political opportunism, I think it's unworthy of the use of this platform given here in the Senate. But Mr. President, we are also therefore calling together all the ministries, departments, and agencies that have responsibility for any activity at any stage of implementation of the ship rider agreement, so that we can ensure that we have a cohesive position on the ways in which, or the possible ways in which, we can ensure that the rights of our citizens are protected, even as we work with partners to ensure that our waters are effectively policed to protect us here from the guns and the drugs. Yes. Mr. President, we're also reaching out to the fishermen so that we can hear firsthand their concerns in relation to their experiences. And this sets the context within which we go forward, Mr. President. I have also recommended to the Prime Minister, and he has accepted my recommendation, that once we have held these meetings, that we will brief the opposition through the National Security Council, where matters of this sensitivity can appropriately be discussed. So, Mr. President, I share these actions and these intentional actions so that we're quite clear that the matter is being treated seriously. The sensitivities that I've raised are also real, and I ask this chamber to respect that as well. But where I can bring clarity to the Jamaican people and to this Senate, I am committed to so doing, as I have now attempted so to do. Mr. President, I thank you.
Senator Knight.
Thank you, President. I almost feel that I owe the Senate an apology, because it is my intervention that has caused all of this, and the contribution of my colleague Senator Senator Lambert Brown. And when I raised this issue, I never thought that it would occupy airspace, television news, and newspapers, and social media for an entire week. I never thought so. And when Senator, I am responding to you.
He's entitled to respond to you.
No.
Senator Brown. Senator Brown. Senator Brown, what is wrong? Talk to her.
Yes, she is.
Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. The minister, the senator asked a question. Calm down.
She knows the answer.
She knows. Being disingenuous.
Minister,
She knows the answer.
the member is entitled to ask a question. No doubt what is happening is a run-up to the question.
No, it's a run-up. He's
No,
entitled.
as I understand it, you have said it over and over, that when a statement is made by a minister, then the
With
person...
the portfolio responsibility response. I'm aware of it. So proceed now, please.
So I'm
Senator Brown, I don't need you to tell me how to do my...
You don't need me to tell you, but last week you were second her side.
Okay.
you
No, Senator,
No, sir.
Senator,
Let me just
no,
let me
no.
just explain something.
No.
What I'm saying,
Senator
President,
Knight, Senator Knight.
President, please allow me. You usually do.
But, and perhaps on this occasion, I'm just going to indicate to Senator Brown, even though you're on your feet, that I consider that very offensive. I consider it offensive.
If you consider it offensive, I withdraw it. But I recognize that last
Thank you.
week
Senator
you
Knight,
were telling her
continue.
not to answer certain questions.
Senator Knight, continue, please.
May I? So far from simply rising to ask questions, I am exercising the privilege to respond and also to ask questions. And my response is there. I have listened to you, Minister, and there's a gossamer that you have woven through which I find it difficult to penetrate. Last week, you gave a statement as a minister. And I rose to ask you a simple question, which was, having regard to that which you have already been briefed on,
And I quote.
and I'm quoting, where did this incident commence? So let me pause there. I wanted to know how it began, because I was aware that there's a process. So I wanted to know where. Was it within territorial waters or on the high seas? That was what that was asking. It had nothing to do with any lawsuit. Let me go on. Then I said, and was it from your information in breach of any agreement between the United States of America and Jamaica familiar as you were then and you are now with the provisions of the law and the treaty, it must have been clear to you that I was dealing with the treaty and therefore the law. And then I said, if so, which agreement? Having regard to your involvement, you must have known that I was speaking about the ship rider. You must. Then I said, and what steps do you intend? And I changed it from the personal and said, does the government of Jamaica intend to take, as between the two states at the diplomatic level? That is clear. Any Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade would, as you must have, understood me to have been dealing with a treaty situation and enacting legislation and dealing with it through the diplomatic channel. No one who could have been listening to that question could have thought by any stretch of the imagination that I was asking about a law case. None. And you clearly not believing I was asking about a law case responded to the question. This is what you said. Mr. President, we are not in possession of any information which would allow us to answer the questions posed by Senator Knight. Pause. That's not true. That is a false statement. You were. We, speaking on behalf of the government of Jamaica, the Minister of National Security was aware. So to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Because it is the Minister of National Security who responded to the call from the treaty state. And it is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to your certain knowledge, because there was correspondence that was addressed to you about this matter that had nothing to do with the law case. So you knew. And, Minister, when you said that, you must have been conscious that what you said was not true. And then,
Mr. President, I think that it is appropriate because the member has said, and not the motive imputed to the minister, and has deliberately said that she's lying. And I think that is inappropriate, and I'd rise on a point of order to object to it.
President, I'm merely using a document, an official document of the Senate, and I am entitled to draw conclusions from that. And I have carefully avoided using offensive language like lying. And I have put it in the acceptable language that it is not true.
What I would like you to do is recognize that you have there a custom developed whereby, as the relevant person responding to a statement, you are entitled to go beyond merely asking a question. But could I ask you really to deal with the matter in the terms of asking the minister a question?
No, with
Mr.
respect.
President,
No, I'm not
Mr.
doing
President.
it. I'm not.
1 minute.
Because,
1 minute, Senator
and
Knight.
the reason why
One Senator
And a
Knight.
point of order,
1
Mr.
minute,
President.
no, 1 minute. Senator Knight.
The reason why I am not, this matter has caused a great deal of public concern. And it arose from a question I asked. And interpretations are being given in the public about whether or what was the subject matter of the questions. And a representative of the government, through a minister, went on a public medium and made the point as to what the minister meant. And it is my obligation to use the documents to help the public to interpret whether or not that is what the minister could have meant.
Mr. President, Mr.
Just 1
President,
minute,
with
1
respect,
minute.
there's nothing in the document that indicates that the minister was not speaking the truth. Whether the member call it not speaking the truth or call it lying is the same imputation. It is similarly incorrect. And I say, with respect, it should not be permitted that I can get up and accuse Senator Knight of saying things and doing things and say is not true.
You wouldn't do
sit
that.
down like that.
You wouldn't do
But
that.
you shouldn't do it. You know better.
No, the evidence is...
You wouldn't do that because you would have no platform
Senator
from which
Knight.
to do it.
Senator Knight.
I have a platform.
Senator Knight. Senator Knight.
Yes.
Senator Knight. The standing orders are clear. The
That I
ministers,
can
the
use
minister,
the document,
the
so
minister
let
has
me
made
go
a
ahead.
statement, and you are entitled to
Exactly.
ask questions about it.
Thank you, sir.
So that's what I'm asking you to do.
I am doing that.
No, you're not. You're really making a
The
statement.
minister came, the minister last week spoke without a document being presented to decide. I raised the point. Because let me
Continue.
finish.
No, just continue. Continue.
No, let me finish. Because when ministers make statements, they are not supposed to veer from the written document. And that written document that they bring, is supposed to be prepared by the ministry. That has been, the minister did not do that last week, and she hadn't done it this week.
So you heard the statement. So could I ask you to continue, please? And you are permitted by the standing orders.
Speech.
You are permitted by the standing orders to ask appropriate and relevant
And
questions.
to respond. And I am going through this diligently. Who it hurts is going to get hurt.
Let's talk about hurt, President. I have raised a point of order. You have not ruled on it, and I'm insisting because I think it is wrong. If you tell me I'm wrong, I'll take my seat and keep my seat. But I don't think it is appropriate for the member to accuse the minister of not speaking the truth. And in my view, there's no basis for it. And even if there is, it's inappropriate. And I'm asking you to rule on it.
I didn't say she's not speaking the truth. I said she must have been conscious I said you must have been conscious that that was not the truth. That's what I said.
What I will do, Senator Knight, for the purposes of the point of order raised by Senator Brown, just refer you to section 35(5) of the standing orders that says no member shall impute improper motive to any other member of either chamber. I don't need anybody shouting at me and asking me. I'm addressing Senator Knight.
Yes.
I'm addressing Senator Knight and I'm reminding him of the relevant standing order and asking him to proceed.
And President, you will have observed that I didn't impute a motive. I didn't impute a motive. I never said that the minister was not speaking the truth because of so and so. I gave no reason. So I did not.
Thank you, Senator Knight. So continue now, please.
Right. So I have not run afoul of it. Now, the minister went on to say, after having said, we are not in possession of any information which would allow us to answer the questions posed by Senator Knight. And I remind you that the questions related to treaty, shipwright agreement, and diplomatic intervention. That's what it related to. And she said, and would simply note that we continue to inquire about the matter, as I have said, both from government agencies and through our consulate, to find out the circumstances that I indicated. The only issue on which we are clear regarding what you just raised is that the matter took place in Haitian waters. Now I'm perplexed. I don't know how to describe that because I don't want to run afoul of the standing orders and I don't want to offend personally anybody. But when it is said, the only issue on which we are clear regarding what you just raised is that the matter took place in Haitian waters. I find that odd. Because you ought at least to have been clear that there was a request made to board a Jamaican vessel, search the vessel, and if necessary, take into custody Jamaicans, and therefore deprive Jamaicans of the right to due process under the Jamaican Constitution and law. You must have been, because from all indications, you and the ministry that you have portfolio responsibility for, you were both involved in the initial process of granting permission to the treaty state to board the Jamaican vessel. So what is said here could cause me, hopefully a reasonable person, to conclude that at the very end, I'm going to put it, least what you said was inaccurate. And if it was inaccurate, it behoves you to correct it. You're human. You're human. So you may have...
So Senator Knight, just put it in the form of a question, please, so the minister can respond to it.
I put it... would you agree that what you said to the Senate on June 14 in connection with, in relation to a question I asked, your response was inaccurate? And and would you agree that that inaccuracy should never have occurred because of your personal involvement in the initial stage of the incident? And would you apologize to the Senate and to the country for that answer or those answers which were capable of misleading the Senate and the public? Those are the questions in relation to that. Then you said that Senator,
Why?
what you remember the question? Would you be willing to apologize to the Senate and the Jamaican public for the inaccurate statements that you made, which were capable of misleading both the Senate and the public? I pause.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Senator Knight. Minister.
I only
this
pause,
statement, this statement was not inaccurate. I did not have the files that connected the individuals directly to that were involved in this the ACLU case, directly to the circumstances that would have come through the ministry at that time when I made that statement. That I had been involved before, 2 years before, is not false. The comment that you make. That I had been involved 2 years before. But these matters do not happen through me necessarily. They happen at different levels in the ministry. And when I said that I was making inquiries to get the information, and I was walking you through the path of my inquiries so that you would understand that it was only after that I would have received the file and been able to assure myself that the persons who had in fact been deported separately and individually, which is why I was trying to sensitize you to the distinguishing features of this case, that the persons who were being viewed as a group and the matter that had been brought to my attention were not immediately apparent and verifiable. But I have subsequently done so. Which is how I'm able to. So no, I'm not prepared to apologize, and no, the statement when I made it was not known to be inaccurate.
Senator Knight, let her finish now. Okay. Are you finished, Minister? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, Jamaican public, please understand this. That what the minister said was, Mr. President, we are not in possession of any information which would allow us to answer the questions posed by Senator Knight. It is a matter for you, not for me, as to whether you believe her or not. And I want to I want to remind you, members of the public, that the question I asked related to that which took place at the commencement of this incident and the waiver of jurisdiction by Jamaica and the ship rider agreement. And I want you members of the public to understand that the Minister of Foreign Affairs played a role in that. We have no, and then she said Haitian waters. We have no other information at this point in time other than what has been sent out in the case document. Members of the public, you need to question that.
Yeah. What you do then?
President, you need to question that, because it is not what was sent out in the case document that deals with treaty obligations and diplomatic approaches. It was what the response was from the Minister of National Security, how it was communicated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and how it was dealt with by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There's a process. Can the minister deny that a letter was written directly to her concerning this matter before June 13th, 2019? What was that letter about? What was the response given? And what diplomatic moves were made?
Two questions.
Pause for that.
It's not easy to read. It's a button.
Understand? Text.
Pardon?
To you, as Minister,
June 13, 2019.
to Mrs. Kamina Johnson-Smith, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Yes. In connection with this matter. Before June 13th, what was the letter about and what was the response? And what diplomatic action taken?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to make clear that no letter was sent to me regarding any allegations of mistreatment in respect of fishermen. No, allow me to answer. No, allow me to answer. Allow me to answer.
Senator Knight.
Allow me to
Senator,
answer.
Minister, 1 minute. Senator Knight. Senator Knight.
No, sir.
Senator Knight. No, Senator Knight. Let the minister answer the question. Hold on. If you have a difficulty with the answer, then you ask another one.
President, please. I asked the question.
It's a quick question.
Answer the question. You know why I'm so insistent? This is what happened last week. When I asked about ship rider, she started to talk about sensitive case.
Senator Knight. If you don't like, if there's an issue with the answer, then raise it at the end of the answer. But let her answer the question. Let the minister answer the question. Minister, answer the question, please.
The reason, Mr. President, that I make the clarification is because there has been confusion in the public's mind when this term, the matter, is used. And I want to be clear, because I don't want it to arise again or to be spun or misconstrued or even positioned incorrectly. That what was brought to my attention, that yes, I can confirm that a letter was written to me regarding a request for a waiver of jurisdiction before June 13, of course. I said that that happened in 2017. No, last week, the question was not about what I said last week. The question was just this, about a letter. Mr. President. And that's exactly why I had to position my answer like that, because there is a deliberate effort, it appears, of some to try to confuse about what is being said. So pardon me, Mr. President, for just being clear that there was no letter sent to me in respect of any allegations in respect of human rights abuses or mistreatment in respect of Jamaican citizens who are subject to a suit against the U.S. Coast Guard. What I had received in what was sent to me addressed to me in 2017 was a request to waive, or an authorization rather, to waive jurisdiction, a request that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade communicate that the Ministry of National Security would waive jurisdiction for prosecution on the advice of the Attorney General, subject to certain conditions. The letter asked that this be communicated to the U.S. authorities who had requested said waiver. Okay? So, again, I make the distinction, Mr. President, because what I indicated last week was that I was not in a position, and I was not in a position because I could not make a direct correlation between the issue that was in the public domain and the specific question that Senator Knight had asked. I could not until I had seen the files. Thank you.
The question I had asked last week related to whether or not this was related to any agreement and whether it had been breached. So is the minister prepared to is the minister prepared to say that because of the effluxion of time and the memory loss, last week she was not in a position to connect the waiver that had been granted to her knowledge with the incident in the Haitian waters? Is she prepared to concede that there was a memory loss and an inability to make the connection, and so her answer was inaccurate? Is she prepared to accept that?
I'm not prepared to accept that my answer was inaccurate. It was accurate. I was not in possession of the information at the time. I was, however, as I just said, unable to make a connection, a correlation, as I just said, between the incident, which was in the public domain, the allegations of mistreatment, and the circumstances that resulted in the detention of the men.
Thank you. That is a matter to be... the acceptance or rejection of that answer will go far beyond your colleagues. So you said, we have no other information at this point in time other than that what has been set out in the case document. When you said that, you had no other information. Was it based on research? And the research turned out that there was no other information other than the case document. Was it based on research?
Minister, President, on a point of order, the issue that I have is that the questioning appears to me to be related to a previous statement and not the statement today. And I don't think that that is appropriate. And I am on a point of order. The questions are being asked about a statement made last week. A statement, this particular last question in particular, and a statement was made this morning, and the question is, questions are to be related to the statement before you at this time. That's the point of order.
In fairness, it is the minister that drew the connection between the previous statement and the statement today. I don't need your approval, Senator Skefford. So just, Senator Knight, just continue for me, please.
Don't take it personal. I'll give you the number.
So did she answer the last question? No, listen, I am in my 70s. I am in my 70s, so I can have memory loss. But when I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, I never had memory loss.
Mr. President, as I indicated, I had started making inquiries. They started with the Consular Department. They then led to the Consulate General. Requests were made for the relevant files. At the time I spoke, I did not have them. And therefore, my response was based on the process that I was following to make inquiries, which I stated on several occasions last week.
The matter is before the court, the minister said, and we therefore have to be quite sensitive about how we address those things. Mr. President, I didn't ask her about any court matter. She upbraided me in the end. That I have my reasons and the government of Jamaica has to consider it in this context and so on. As I said then, the matter is in court in the United States of America. Whilst I understand your approach at sensitivity, the fact is that quite apart from a legal issue, there is an issue which would arise as between the relationship between states, and that has nothing to do with the legal issue pending in the United States of America. And then there was some intervention by learned Mr. Senator Robert Nestor Morgan. But those objections faded away. I asked her, something as urgent as this from yesterday morning at least, And you come here and you don't even know, you haven't even looked at the shipwrighter agreement. And then a whole lot of things.
So the question, Senator Knight?
She said she came here to clarify what she said last week. That is what she said. I'm not in a courtroom. And if I were in a courtroom, she wouldn't be as comfortable as she is now. You don't believe it? Wait for the experience.
You know, Mr. President, I think that that sounds to me like an attempt at intimidation, Mr. President. I'm sure senators are not allowed to try to intimidate other members.
Senator Knight. Senator Knight. Senator Knight. Move on for me, please.
President, from the answers given by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade and the statements made by her last week and this week, two things emerge clearly.
Which you are going to ask questions about.
Which I am speaking about, as I have a right. The minister, the one? Pete sent me a picture of yourself and himself. Yeah. Pete knows that I am fair, but when you try to slip, then unless you slide, you aren't trying to, but you are doing it without trying. Pete can't intervene now. It's bigger than me and Pete. It's above you. Minister? It is odd, very odd, that as involved as you were and as your ministry was, when the question was posed to you and you put it within the realm of court case and you didn't know anything about it, it would be peculiar if it was a simple memory loss. Minister, when you said that when it is reported on your behalf, and you seem to have adopted it, that it is the sensitivity that caused you to have been as cautious as you were. As cautious as you were, then that's not borne out by the questions posed and your answer. Last week I made the comment that there was inefficiency. This week I add there was negligence, there was inefficiency, there was a don't care attitude, And it has ended with a gossamer being woven. This web that you have sought to produce has an apt description. This web that you have woven, this web that you has opened, will be, that's why it's a web of deceit. I haven't said that. I don't have to because I don't want to. I said that. Of course I know what I'm doing. What, you think I don't know what I'm doing? I know what I'm doing.
Senator Knight, address me.
And I'm going to tell you something
Senator
further.
Knight, Senator Knight.
I'm going to
Senator
tell you
Knight,
something.
could I ask you to tell Mr. Brown when the two of you go downstairs later?
Yes.
And just address me? And if you have another question to ask, Senator
Yes, but
Johnson
I'm
Smith,
just going
you
to
could
finish
just
up
ask.
by letting the public know what I am doing. What I am doing, President, is to bear the facts before you, the Senate, and the public for a decision to be taken at an appropriate time as to whether, one, any standing order was breached, and two, whether the public should call that consequences be attached to the responses that were given by the minister.
So the questions you're asking are questions you're asking of the public.
I am here on the public's behalf. I'm not here on behalf of the PNP. I am here because I am here because the PNP appointed me. The PNP. It's the PNP that caused me to be here. But once I am here, then I now have to look to my public responsibility. Some of them over there, all of them over there, they are appointed by labor right. It's labor right appoint you.
Senator Knight, come now, man, just stick to the script and let's move on. Come now, please.
When they steal my time, it's labor right appoint you. Some of you go on like you're not labor right. You're very labor right. Minister, I entreat you. If there be any room within your thinking to find that your answers last week and your statement today, taken together or singly, could possibly or probably have misled the Senate or misled the public, I entreat you to stand up, face it, say it, and ask for forgiveness because you did not mean it. But at least at the very least, understand what you did and let your conscience be your guide.
That's difficult though.
Mr. President, I just want to state unequivocally for the record and to the people of Jamaica, as a result of the entreaty just made, that not only did I not mislead this Senate or state any falsehood, not only did I not breach any standing order, or make any inaccurate statement, on behalf of the professionals of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, I absolutely have to bring them into this because you raised it. You raised it. Who have guided me, and who advise, and who are fundamental to the very processes to which Senator Knight has referred. I reject his statements on their behalf. I reject them. I reject each and every one. Each and every one. I reject them on behalf of every professional. Without whom, Mr. President, without whose support, the undeniable successes of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs over the last 3 years could not have occurred without their support. On their behalf, I reject every allegation he has made of inefficiency and of incompetence and of every other negative adjective ascribed. I reject every one on their behalf, Mr. President.
Point of order, Mr. President. A point of order. A point of order. You called on Pete because you wanted mercy.
Senator Knight.
What's the point of
You have a
order?
point of order.
I want to make it clear
It's a dull point.
that I had
Nonsense.
at no stage in any question I asked or any comment I made was
Point of clarification.
call it that.
What you're saying is that you never implicated the ministry.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is made up of the finest officers in the government service. What I will say,
Who prepared the statement? Him said the ministry prepared the statement.
I will say,
not we.
what I will say,
he's referring to
because
the statement
they
from last week.
would never say and would never
So where did the
think
notes
it.
come from?
But what
Out of the sky. Nonsense. Not yesterday. You know that.
what I will say
You know, Senator.
is that the officers of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs deserve a better minister than they have.
That's the solution.
Mr. President,
Minister of Foreign Affairs. And we have a great Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Best in my lifetime, for sure.
Mr. Brown, you have a question or questions. Please proceed.
Best in my life.
Mr. President, arising from the statement this morning of the minister, I have some questions which I'd like to raise. First, I want to ask whether there were any consular contact, that is, the fine men and women of our ministry, whether there were any contact by the consular service with the men prior to them being put on trial.
Minister, just respond so we can move along quickly, please.
I am not aware of any. Thank you.
Senator Brown?
So my understanding is that the answer is there was no contact. Oh, no. So let me ask
She
it
said
again.
she was not aware.
Let me ask it again. Am I to understand, Minister, that your lack of awareness, having done your investigation, would be indicative that there was no consular contact with the men before they faced the United States court?
There is no record of same.
Good, thank you. No record of consular contact. I'd also like to ask Mr. President of the Minister, how many consular offices had contact, or officers had contact with any of those 5 men prior to the deportation of them?
I would have to verify that, Mr. President. I am aware of one, but I would have to verify if there were further.
So I'm understanding from the minister's answer that there might have been one prior contact before the deportation, so that they would be in prison for 10 months, and she need to verify if there was one contact. Well, could I hear the occasion on which this one contact took place?
This was, Mr. President, the reference that I made last week, which is the on deportation. There is an interview that takes place, rather, on request for the emergency travel certificate, which is issued to permit the return of the citizen. There's an interview which takes place to ascertain nationality, and that is the occasion on which to which I refer.
Mr. President, could I ask, where did that interview take place? Was it while the men were in jail, in prison, or was it at the consular office of the ministry, or at the airport, or wherever it was? I want to know that.
I would have to verify the exact location, Mr. President. But it is, so far as I understand, it was not at the consulate itself.
Sorry, you're saying? I didn't hear that. I was distracted. Can I just clarify the answer? Was the interview at the consulate, you're saying? Not there. Are you aware of the circumstances under which the interview took place? And that's one. And 2, can you tell the Senate whether any of your consular officer asked the men about their treatment while in detention on the U.S. Coast Guard vessels?
Mr. President, I can seek the details of the conversation, which might assist. But as I pointed out earlier today, one of the difficulties in making the connection, the correlation between the two matters, was that when the request was made for the deportation, it was not brought to the attention of the consulate that any of the men had been detained in the circumstances which have subsequently been spoken to.
Sorry, so to the best of your knowledge, Minister. To the best of your knowledge, Minister. Thank you, sir. To the best of your knowledge, Minister. Mr. President, I'm aware, and the Minister can confirm from our staff, I'm aware, that when, as in the case of the Qatari rapist, the rapist in Qatar, consular service went to visit that person in prison. I want to get from the Minister, is she aware? So are you listening to me, or are you quarreling with KD? Good. And I repeat, in the case, and you are aware, and the President was aware, and Senator Gale was aware of much discussion in the Senate about the person convicted of rape in Qatar, your ministry should be aware that numerous consular contacts took place where people move travel from Dubai to Qatar to check. Can you tell us whether or not your consular officers in Miami visit any of those men while they're in prison?
Senator Brown, the minister said that she's aware of one visit.
And I'm asking if that includes a visit to the men while they're in prison. I'm entitled to know that because the country wants to know the money we're paying for these people in Miami and otherwise, whether they're defending our people. So while the men were in prison, did our consular service went to visit them?
Mr. President?
This is not an attack on the civil service.
Allow the minister to answer, please. Go ahead, please, minister.
Mr. President, it is part of the business of the ministry to make consular visits to prisons. Because of the volume of Jamaicans, regretfully, that are in prison, whether in Florida or elsewhere overseas, it is impossible for us to always see everyone. Where there are requests for consular assistance, we unfailingly visit and inquire and follow up. To the best of my knowledge, the Consulate General was not aware of these men's imprisonment until the request was made for their emergency certificate.
Thank you.
The consular engagement was the point to which I referred earlier.
Mr. President, I'm in regard for the fact that the minister played a role in signing the waiver. Can she tell us what, and so that all these Jamaicans who are in prison, very few of them are there as a result of a waiver signed by the government of Jamaica. So I'm trying to find out whether, having signed over the waiver for these 5 Jamaican fishermen, did the minister inform the consulate that these men were picked up at sea, they are likely to be facing American court, and therefore ensuring that we give them the protection which the shipwright agreement require that they receive. You can't lump them in Jamaica and find for fighting, thieving, shooting, drugs. These are special sets that you, Mr. President, and I passed the law allowing for that.
I never passed it.
You man, you were part of it here. The Parliament passed it.
Senator,
and you are part of the Parliament.
Senator,
but the neophyte seems to be taking our attention.
Minister, answer that for me, please.
Mr.
You heard the question?
No, I'm not 100% clear on the question, but I want to make quite clear that I did not sign any waiver. I did not sign any waiver of anything. And I want to correct him for the record, as he has repeated on more than one occasion, just a while ago, that I signed. I didn't sign anything. So he needs, but now I would wish his clarification of the question.
Mr. President, it's clear to me that the Attorney General was consulted. Minister Chang, the Minister of National Security, whoever it was at the time, communicate to the American government through the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who happened to be this Minister of Foreign Affairs, and therefore the question is, the waiver process that she was involved in, did she communicate?
Scarefree. I'm sorry, Senator Scarefree, would you please stop interrupting Senator Brown? No, but Senator Brown is hitting you and telling you to leave him alone.
No, Mr. President, so my name is only going to call your colleague. Yes, Cavern. Please, with due respect, balance the argument.
No, well, I wasn't looking over there.
I know my name is easy to call.
I saw Senator Brown touching you and telling you to just leave him so he can complete.
I am supporting my colleague.
Mr. President, let me ask a question because I was interrupted in person. Given the fact that the Attorney General advised the National Security Minister, who then advised this Minister of Foreign Affairs to waive, to write to the Americans communicating our waiver of the rights of these Jamaicans to be tried in Jamaica, did this minister communicate with our fine professional staff to indicate to them that here are 5 Jamaicans who are going to be facing trial in the United States? Could you have a look in and do the things that the consular officers are paid to do? I was trying to find that out. May I get an answer to that?
So, Mr. President, it would probably be helpful for me to explain a little more about the circumstances regarding the provision of consular assistance. It's a right under the Vienna Convention, and it is a right which is exercisable by the person who holds that right, that is the citizen who is overseas. It is not a right that can be exercised without their request. The issue is, it is Article 36, where someone is detained in prison or under Article 36C, sir, look it up yourself, that it must be that where a person is in those circumstances, the express request for consular assistance. Now, Mr. President, I want to make it clear that when the Ministry of National Security advised the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to communicate that waiver would be authorized. Waiver of process, not waiver of rights. Waiver of rights, waiver of jurisdiction to prosecute. Waiver of jurisdiction to prosecute. I'd said it earlier. Why, Mr. President, can I
Come on.
Why can I? Is there a reason I cannot be heard in silence, Mr. President? I am.
I don't know.
Senate Minister, perhaps a answer. You ever thought of that? In which case we can move on.
I asked the question, I want to hear the answer.
You ask the question and then you're making up a rumbling over there, so the minister...
I have made up no rumbling. Sorry, anything. I have remained calm.
You have remained...
Mr.
You have
President.
remained calm.
But, Mr. President, I think it is time for us to really try and maintain some decorum. This Senate, of which we are all here, we can't be attacking the President so often.
Thank you, Minister. Just ask the question. Answer the question. Just answer the question.
Mr. President, it's important to note that even where persons are detained by a third country and are advised of their right to consular assistance, that even then sometimes they do not avail themselves of that right. And I'm not saying that that happened in this circumstance, but it has happened. So I need no, well.
Consular officer sent me for that.
President.
I don't think the minister has finished. I didn't stop you,
No,
okay.
she was. President, could the minister whether or not the shipwright agreement and the jurisdiction conditions to be followed, to be observed, which include the protection of the rights of the fishermen?
Mr. President, I indicated in my public statement, and this has been stated, perhaps I should restate, however. Yes, Mr. President, that when the waiver was granted, it was granted on conditions, and those conditions related to the health and well-being of the men, that they would be provided with legal assistance, that they're entitled to legal representation in any case that follows, and also that they're entitled to be notified of their right to consular assistance. And, Mr. President, I will go further to say that the Jamaican government was assured that these conditions would be met.
President, can the minister indicate to us what steps the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade took to ensure that those conditions in the waiver document were observed? Or is it that we were relying totally on the United States government while abandoning, as a Ministry of Government of Jamaica, the fishermen who were in need? Sell out, you prefer me use? So I'm waiting for an answer to that, and I have another question.
Point of order, Mr. President. A point of
consent.
order. Mr. President, it cannot be that in this Senate we continue to allow that kind of inflammatory language to stand on the record. Because what will happen is years from now, people will come back and listen and read the Hansard and believe it. It is nonsense. There is nothing that could establish the kind of nonsensical statements that continue to be uttered. He must be stopped.
No, Mr. President. Well, let me break it down. Can I ask the minister whether or not, having regard for the conditionalities in the waiver document, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs took any steps to ensure that they were observed? I can't see how that can be improper.
That's a different question than the one that you're asking.
Well, maybe I've clarified, I've rephrased.
Mr. President, the ministry followed all the protocols. That is what I will say.
Protocol. May I ask, who followed up? Who followed up from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to make sure those were observed? I don't know what is this protocol.
All protocols were followed.
Could I ask then, Mr. President, as a follow-up, what are the protocols? After your 120 break, what are the protocols?
Members, I bring to your attention that it is 1:20. We are still on statement by ministers. I'm going to ask that the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:20 to complete the business.
Mr. President, might I ask, the time being 1:21, might I ask that the Senate be allowed to sit, the standing orders be suspended to allow the Senate to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day?
The question is that the Senate be allowed to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the order to the business of the day. Those in favor? Against?
Mr. President, with that out of the way, could I ask what are the protocols involved? I am asking what are the... Mr. President, what are the protocols involved when waivers been given under the shipwrighter agreement? Because the minister said they have followed all protocol, but we only know about, she's concerned maybe one visit. So I want to know what are the protocols involved. And as a member of the Senate, I'm entitled to know. And I hope the minister will answer that question.
Mr. President, I think we're now treading on dangerous ground. Mr. President, if it is that senators have further questions on the matter of shipwrighter, implementation of the maritime drug trafficking suppression, yes, Mr. President, I'm going to ask, because of the sensitivity of matters related to bilateral treaties such as the shipwrighter agreement, even if they are enacted by legislation, they are by their nature sensitive. And I'm going to ask, therefore, that if there are further questions, that they be submitted in writing, that I get guidance from the Attorney General on their responses and that they can be put back. I think we are now going down a path which is ill-advised and unadvisable for this Senate. It is not the place. It is not the place.
Mr. President, it will appear to me that the government is trying to hide behind protocols. But let me ask another question. Let me move on to another question. That is not ship rider.
You're running on your eye.
You like why not shouting, President? We can get proofs. President, I'd like to ask the minister, because she spoke about the discussion of last week and the statement she made. If when I asked her last week, Sophie. When I asked the minister last week, and I said, given that the event started in 2017, can the minister indicate to the Senate when was the first time that this information came to the attention of the government of Jamaica? Now we are aware, Mr. President, that this information came to the government's attention from 2017. And whereas this Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade played a part in communicating the waiver to the United States, is she prepared to accept today that in pointing us to 2018, that she misled the Senate?
Mr. President, I have never misled the Senate.
Thank you. Senator Brown, come on.
Her answer is no. Having said no, is she prepared to reconsider her response last week, given her integral role in 2017, and at least apologize to those of us in the Senate and in the country who felt, if you listen, you will hear. Mr. President, you hear the little fellow making all of those noise? I'm not finished. I'm not finished, sir.
I know you're not finished. I have been more than lenient with the questions that I have permitted. You are repeating questions that were asked, some of them by Senator Knight and some of them by yourself.
No, not true.
So I'm going to ask you to conclude questioning.
That's what I'm trying to do, you know.
Okay.
But you interrupted me. It's your right to do, but you interrupted me. President, having regard for what the ACLU have said about the role of the Minister and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, having regard for all that has come out, is the Minister prepared to acknowledge that her statement was at least ambiguous last week?
Minister, answer that question, please.
No, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Brown. Announcements.
I have a right to ask questions, Mr. President.
That's right.
I have a right to ask. Yes.
Senator Crawford, go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. I have a few questions I'd like to ask based on the statement that was made. The first question I have, Mr. President, to the Minister is if she signed the waiver that is in question for these 4 fishermen less than 2 years ago.
Mr. President, as stated earlier, I signed nothing.
Mr. President, then I ask, did she receive a letter, a waiver letter, less than 2 years ago? Mr. President.
No, but that was all dealt with, you know.
No, Mr. President. It was highlighted, Mr. President, it was highlighted that the minister received a letter. I am adding to that question if she received that letter less than 2 years ago.
Mr. President, the letter from the Ministry of National Security in relation to the waiver of jurisdiction was sent in 2017. Yes.
Mr. President, I think the minister has agreed that she received the letter less than 2 years ago. Okay, in 2017, approximately 2 years ago. Now, the second thing, Mr. President, if the minister is of the opinion that the signing of such a letter is mandatory or by choice of the minister or whoever is the signatory, is the act, under the act, is it mandatory to sign once the letter is received, or if there's a choice to sign once the letter is received? Whoever is the waiver letter, once the waiver is requested, is it mandatory to be given or no?
No, Mr. President, it is not.
Mr. President, I asked that question because in the statement the minister found it necessary to acknowledge that all members of the opposition voted against the clause that allowed for such a waiver. That's right. Therefore, if it is not, and yes, but in this case, the government at this time would have had an option to offer the waiver or not. In this case, yes. In this case, that was done by choice. Madam Minister, you indicated in your initial statement and repeated today that you are aware of some facts based on a social media video. That those facts would have included that there were 4 fishermen, that those facts would have included that they were arrested, that those facts would have included that they were treated badly. You ever continue to say that you couldn't connect those facts that you saw on the social media with the case that had occurred? Would you suggest that there are many such cases in the period that we're discussing in the last 2 years? Are there many such cases of waivers being granted in general and for fishermen in particular?
Mr. President, I'll clarify that I said I was aware of certain allegations and yes, certain facts in respect of the number of fishermen. I would not say that there have been many cases, no.
So would you argue that being that you were aware of at least some facts and that there were not many cases, the inability to connect is somewhat questionable?
No, Mr. President, and those circumstances have been laid out in several different ways and from several different perspectives today alone.
Thank you. Would you argue, Mr. President, I'd like to ask the minister if there is a basis that reports are sent on persons that are deported, whether they're deported on commercial flights or whether they're deported on charter flights. Is information sent to your ministry or any other ministry about persons being deported? I'm asking that based on the simple fact that in your statement today, you made special reference that they came on a charter. Can they come on a charter without information being sent that they're being deported? And would that information have been sent to you?
The information would not have been sent to me, but there would be some knowledge between both the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and National Security, the latter being the one that's ultimately responsible for the deportation.
Just being clear, when we say you in your position as Minister of Foreign Affairs.
No, they're not sent to me.
And so therefore the ministry is included in the conversation. But I get what you're saying. So would you argue then that the fact that they came on a commercial flight is of no substance to the conversation we're having? You suggested that they came on a commercial flight and by extension, seemingly you were unaware that they were returned.
Mr. President, that was one of the matters which was raised. I also raised the fact that the requests for emergency travel certificates were made at different times. They were made as a group. They were not made as a group, and they made no reference to the circumstances that originated their detention. This was why there was no connection made.
Yes, I heard that.
All right. You also made reference to conversations with members of the consulate who you suggested, not your words, but in my opinion, I concluded that they were flippant in being asked were there complaints. You said, they said, we're Jamaicans, Jamaicans complain. You said that, Minister. You said that verbatim. You said that you had a conversation. Mr. President? Mr. President?
Mr. Crawford, just ask the question, please.
Yes, but I'm making it known. Right? The minister is rejecting the truth that she stated a conversation with members of the consulate. The response could be concluded to be flippant because the individual suggested, was asked, did they complain? And they said the Jamaicans complained.
All right, so ask the question and let's move on, please.
Would the minister argue that such a mindset is not acceptable for that flippant outlook as it relates to complaints to the consulate?
Mr. President, I do not believe that the officer in question was being flippant. The conversation did not happen exactly as was set out. What I was saying was that what I said was that at one of the things that was said.
Senator Crawford, sit properly enough, please.
One of the things that was said when being questioned as to whether there was any, there had ever been or it was usual for this person to receive complaints at that point of engagement, in other engagements with other persons who are returned to Jamaica, whether it was usual or it had occurred or it would occurs that he gets complaints about treatment. And he said it in a way which sort of recognized that it happens often. And I don't think the intention was to be flippant. It was to reflect the regularity with which it occurs. Thank you.
Would you say that the regularity of the complaint is synonymous with the regularity of the offense, of the fact that it happens regularly? By extension, they complain regularly. Do you have any information to suggest that?
No, Mr. President, no, I don't have any information to answer that question.
Mr. President, in her statement, the minister suggested great care for the treatment of Jamaicans internationally. I want to ask if there's a report sent to the minister or the ministry, whether monthly or quarterly or weekly, about such abuses or about such complaints.
Mr. President, I'm happy to provide on another occasion a more detailed response on the processes which are offered, the consular assistance and the type of reporting which exists within the ministry.
Mr. President, the answer has nothing to do with the question. I said if there's a report sent to the ministry or the minister, and if there is a periodic basis upon which such report is sent, that have nothing to do with the operations and the whatever. All I'm saying is, if we are so committed and caring, we would at least want the information. Is that information sent to the ministry? And